Tourney time in the ACC. Welcome into the beautiful Moss Arts Center in Blacksburg, Virginia for your ACC Tournament edition of the 3304 Sports Tip-Off Show. I'm your host, Robert Bateman, joined alongside by Phoebe Winters and Tucker Terry. Guys, how are you all enjoying the madness of March so far?
Well, I couldn't be more excited. Just who doesn't love a good Cinderella story? And we've already seen some, looking at Boston College taking down Miami, blowing out Clemson, and then almost beating UVA in an overtime thriller. And then you've got NC State, who knocked off Duke for their first ranked win of the season. Now they're heading to the semis in the ACC tournament.
Yeah, the Wolfpack's been on a roll. How about you, Phoebes?
I definitely agree with what you're saying, Tucker. I mean, who doesn't love a Cinderella story? It's what makes the sport of basketball. It's what makes March. But honestly, my favorite part is seeing these rivalries come to a head in March just because it's so important to get those wins at this time. So being able to see UNC and Duke, a long-held rivalry, take on each other again, and UNC came out with the win. That's my favorite part of March, is seeing those rivalries.
Yeah, I mean, the parity in men's basketball is great. It feels like anyone can beat anyone at any time. Well, before we get into the nitty-gritty of the ongoing ACC men's tournament, let's quickly dive into the Virginia Tech women's basketball team, who've been on a roller coaster ride to end their season. For more on the Queens of the Castle, here's Caitlin Ford.
After racking up a 10-game winning streak from mid-January to late February, the Hokies cruised into March with high spirits. But this momentum came to a halt after losing the final two matchups of the season. Their number one seed in the AC tournament had already been secured before those games, so it wasn't so much the losses that hindered their plans. In the Commonwealth Clash on March 3rd, star Elizabeth Kitley mislanded on her knee in a layup attempt and sat the rest of the game, and subsequently the entire ACC tournament. Heading into Greensboro on Friday to face Miami, there were many concerns about the team's fate without Kitley. The squad had to rearrange some puzzle pieces in order to find their groove without her. Georgia Amoore looked like she was forcing some of her shots in the first half, only scoring 4 points. But she unleashed in the second half, scoring 23. Freshman Clara Strack also stepped up to the plate, grabbing 5 rebounds and 10 points. The game was a back-and-forth battle, only within 4 points until about the 3-minute mark in the fourth quarter, when the Hokies widened their lead and went on to win 55-47 in the quarterfinals. It wasn't perfect, but the team did what they needed to do to get the job done. Saturday was a different story. Notre Dame dominated the court against the Hokies with an explosive offense. Virginia Tech kept within striking distance during the first half, but things quickly escalated in the third quarter, leading to a devastating almost 30-point loss. Amoore again notched almost half of her team's points. The Hokies missed a lot of shots they would normally make, and it was evident that they were trying to make up for Kitley's absence. They dropped the semifinals 53-82, and Notre Dame went on to win the tournament. Kenny Brooks' team will have to shift gears as they await their seeding for the NCAA tournament, which will be revealed on Sunday, March 17th. Losing the ACC tournament doesn't help their case, but the Hokies remain hopeful to have a seed high enough to play in Cassell Coliseum, where home court advantage is, of course, huge. Kitley has not been ruled out for the tournament, but her teammates and fans wait anxiously to find out if she will be playing. Regardless of if Liz plays, the Hokies will have to rebound and find a way to make a run in the tournament in hopes of making it to the Final Four for the second year in a row, or even further.
Great stuff, Caitlin. Well, Phoebe, I quickly want to ask you, if Liz Kitley is unable to come back for the Hokies for the NCAA tournament, what do you think the ceiling is for him?
You know, Rob, unfortunately, I think without Liz on that court, the ceiling is quite low for the Virginia Tech squad. I mean, we saw in the ACC tournament, they really struggled to pull out that win against Miami and then kind of completely fell apart against Notre Dame. I think what's unfortunate, without having Liz Kitley, who does put up the bulk of their scoring, the opponents really get to fixate on Georgia Amoore, and they get to crowd her with multiple defenders, and that really limits her shooting abilities. So I think if Liz Kitley is unable to make it to the NCAA tournament, unless in this last week they've taken the time to really pinpoint another player that can step up for that scoring for this squad, I think the ceiling is quite low, and I think they're going to really struggle to pull out multiple wins.
Yeah, I mean, you always need other players to step up, right, if you want to make a deep run. And Tucker, my question for you is, if the Hokies maintain a top 4 seed, which is they're currently projected, how do you think playing in front of Cassell Coliseum for their first 2 games will help the Hokies?
Well, playing in front of their home court just makes all the difference. Like, we've seen that this year. They're 15-0 on their home floor, 31-1 in the last 2 years. But overall, it's easier to shoot on the home court, not just for the Hokies, but all across college basketball. And without Liz Kitley in the paint, the Hokies really have to rely on their perimeter players. So shooting for Kayla King, Matilda Eck, who hasn't scored in 3 games, and Georgia Amor, that's going to make all the difference if the Hokies are going to have a chance for a Sweet 16 run.
Yeah, for sure. And it's called home court advantage for a reason. And last year, the Hokies made it all the way to the Final Four alongside South Carolina and LSU, who had quite the interesting matchup in the SEC tournament final this past weekend. For an in-depth breakdown on the pandemonium that occurred, it's Sam Mustow.
Tensions flared in the SEC championship game between South Carolina and LSU. We saw a lot from the Gamecocks' 79-72 victory, but one thing stood over all else. These two teams do not like each other. The Gamecocks and Tigers faced off in Baton Rouge earlier this season, a 6-point South Carolina victory that saw LSU forward Angel Reese foul out with 4 minutes left. It's a game that Tigers head coach Kim Mulkey believed they could have won if Reese was on the floor down the stretch. Sunday's rematch was chippy, to say the least. The two teams traded leads until late in the fourth quarter when the Gamecocks pulled away. However, the final score was far from the largest story of the afternoon. With just over 2 minutes remaining in the game, Tigers guard Flau'jae Johnson intentionally fouled Gamecocks guard Malijah Fulwiley. South Carolina center Camila Cardoso shoved Johnson and the benches cleared. Both teams confronted each other near the scorer's table before officials and coaches quickly pulled them apart. All players who left the bench, aside from those already on the court, were ejected and sent to the locker rooms, resulting in 5-on-5 basketball for the last 2 minutes. Cardoso was ejected for fighting and will miss the Gamecocks' first-round game of the NCAA tournament. South Carolina head coach Dawn Staley said after the game, "What you saw were two teams, highly competitive teams, trying to win a conference championship. They did not handle it well. Our players didn't. Their players didn't. It escalated." Those two highly competitive teams could see each other again come March Madness. The NCAA Tournament Selection Committee will announce its bracket pool on Sunday, then revealing possible options for a rematch later this month. Back to you.
Well done, Sam. On that note, it seems like a perfect time to switch over to the men's side of the basketball realm. And for an in-depth report on Virginia Tech in the ACC tournament, it's our very own Hayden Tolbert.
After a disappointing loss Wednesday afternoon, the Hokies' hopes of a late tournament bid were squandered by the Florida State Seminoles in an 86-76 loss in our nation's capital. Virginia Tech started out hot as they shot 64% from the field in the first half, but it was the Seminoles that kept up with the Hokies by scoring 11 points from Virginia Tech's 5 turnovers in the first half. That was the reason why it was just a 1-point game after the first half. Now, both teams were shooting more than 55% from the first half, but the second half defense from the Seminoles is when the tides turned. Virginia Tech started the opening minutes in the second half going 4 of 17, along with adding 8 turnovers to the already 5 in the first half. When Coach Mike Young was asked if the Seminoles defense was the reason why for the slow start in the second half for the Hokies, he replied, "They were really good. They were very disruptive, and it was uncomfortable." Despite being uncomfortable, 2 Hokies were bright spots in this one as Sean Badula and Tyler Nickel combined for 42, but it was a career high for Jameer Watkins scoring 34, with those 12 points being in the final 3 minutes. A player that was most uncomfortable was Hokies' Hunter Couture. It was a rough night for Couture as he shot 1 for 5 from the field and finished with 8 points, as it was uncharacteristic for him to do when just 2 years ago when the Hokies won in Brooklyn, Couture scored 31 and was named MVP of the tournament. Being a fan, you have to feel bad for the fifth-year senior and all-time three-point leader, as he won't get a final crack at the big dance. As they will miss the NCAA tournament for the second straight year, Virginia Tech will get the chance to give Hokie Nation optimism in the coming years and give departing seniors a few more games to play in an NIT tournament bid and a potential game in Castle coming in April. Back to you guys.
Phenomenal work, Hayden. All right, my friends. It is time that we talk about the semifinals for the ACC tourney, which are set. It's number 1 UNC taking on the number 4 seeded Pitt Panthers, and on the other side, the number 10 seeded NC State Wolfpacks got on a run and made it to the semifinal to take on the number 3 Virginia Cavaliers, who just upset Boston College. I mean, not really an upset, but they knocked them off in overtime. So, guys, what do you predict for the rest of the tournament?
I'm predicting a UNC and UVA matchup. Now, as much as we all love a Cinderella story, and as much as I want to be the eternal optimist, I think NC State's run is going to come to an end. I think UVA just has such a strong squad, and with NC State going on a 4-game losing streak right before the tournament, I think they are going to hit that bump and not quite make it to the finals. And as for UNC and Pitt, I think with Armando Bacot, who had 14 points and 10 rebounds over FSU and averages 15.5 points and 10.5 rebounds in his last 6 games against Pitt, I think he's just going to be so strong for that UNC squad, along with Cormac Ryan, who's currently shooting 16.7%. I think this shooting squad from UNC is just too strong for Pitt to quite overcome.
Okay, give her the Tar Heels.
Yeah, so I'm actually going to disagree with what you said about NC State. I think we see a North Carolina final between North Carolina and NC State. I just like NC State's matchup with Virginia, as Virginia does not have a lot of size in the front court. They've got Jordan Minor, who's played a big role recently, but I think DJ Burns can really punish any other player on Virginia's roster, and he's also a great passer too. In the first 2 games against UVA, he was able to pass out of the double teams that they always throw in the post. So I see NC State taking down UVA, but then I can't disagree. North Carolina is just the best team in the ACC this year. They've got too many options, and I just think they're too hard to beat.
All right, so you're both taking the Tar Heels. Well, in our first matchup between UNC and Pitt, I agree with you guys. I think RJ Davis and Armando Bacot are just too strong of a 1-2 punch for Pitt to knock off. So give me the Tar Heels going to the finals. Now, on the other side, now what I don't like about UVA is how defensive they play, because especially against a team like NC State, I could see them upsetting them just off the fact that NC State can score the ball. I mean, you have DJ Horn and the 2 DJs, DJ Burns Jr. and DJ Horn. I mean, those guys are spinning records out there the way they can score. So I like NC State going to the final too. Now, just to play spoiler, because I know we're going to talk about this after the tournament ends on Saturday, I'm going to take the Wolfpack winning it all. I like the Cinderella story run. UNC doesn't really need to win the ACC tournament. I mean, they want to, of course, but I just think at the end of the day, NC State's going to be hungry. They've played their way all the way through since day 2 of the tournament. So I think we could see the Wolfpack knocking everything off. But I think it's time we head out of here. So, guys, I would like to thank our reporters, Caitlin Ford, Sam Mustow, and Hayden Tolbert, our production crew behind the scenes, and Riley Klaus and Cody Wagner, and, of course, my panelists next to me, Phoebe Winters and Tucker Terry. I'm Robert Bateman, and we'll see you guys next week on 3304 Sports.